All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this live broadcast debate sponsored by Activist Post. Today we have Eric July and Vin Armani. They are debating secession from an anarchist perspective. Resolved, state seceding from the United States is a good thing. Eric July will be arguing in support of the resolution. Vin Armani will be arguing against. The debate will consist of 3 rounds. Vin and Eric will have 5 minutes each per round to make their case. Each segment will be timed and the timer will appear on the screen. And we have Vin kicking it off. There you go, Vin.
Thank you very much, Christian. Thank you, Eric, for being a part of this debate. I hope that it's the first of many that we can have in this sort of venue. There are a lot of issues that those of us who are believers in liberty disagree upon, and I think sometimes 140 characters or a Facebook comment, it doesn't really provide all of the background. So thank you, Eric, for agreeing to do this. So today we're talking about secession, and in particular how this has come to mind is, of course, the CalExit. And there are a lot of people on both sides of this issue in the libertarian/anarchist community. For myself, as an agorist, the ideas behind moving toward a stateless society and the immoral nature of the state is not just hypothetical, it's not academic. It's something that we make our business, literally. And so when we think about moving toward a stateless society, we also have to think about what type of state we would like to basically fight against. And secession, the idea that perhaps California could become its own country, I believe, would provide quite a few challenges that would not be there if California were to remain as a state. So there's basically 4 things that I would like to cover today. The first thing, I am all in support of decentralization. I think most people who are anarchists, most people who are for liberty, know that decentralization is going to be key to our movement. However, I do not believe that California seceding from the United States would represent decentralization. As a matter of fact, I believe that in many ways, for both the people inside California, certainly the people inside California, but the people outside California as well, that it would actually represent in their everyday lives a greater centralization of state power. That's the first thing I want to talk about. The second thing is, this is not just any country having a piece of it secede. The United States is a very special place when it comes to the philosophy of liberty, obviously. It's a historical anomaly that we're living inside of. And the states themselves were constructed with liberty in mind, with a separation of powers. Now, it is not the ultimate state that we would like. It is not the ultimate situation that we would like. Of course, we would like to see the federal government go away. We'd like to see the state governments go away. But California leaving the federal United States government, the things that would be lost in terms of liberty, I think, are considerable. And California would necessarily become a more totalitarian, I believe, state sitting right on the side of the United States. Which brings me to the third thing. As someone who's a native Californian, as someone who has left California because of California's level of oppression and level of state power. I mean, I now live in Las Vegas, which is, 30 minutes from the California border, but just so that I could get out of California. I do believe that for people in California, and particularly people who are most interested in liberty, that leaving the United States is going to be all bad for them, all bad. Now, there are people who are not in California who say, let them go, let them turn into a communist hellhole, like let them go, let the socialists have control. But I'm going to argue today that even the people outside, that having that counterbalance of California, at least on a level where anybody running for federal office like president has to take California into account, having things like the Ninth Circuit Court, which is the most liberal court, has struck down some of the recent Trump travel bans. Having that sort of check and balance for us as we move forward to fight is actually going to be a boon for us. And that California leaving, is going to be a net negative for people who are interested in liberty and want to see a stateless society both inside California and outside. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Vin. And next we have Eric. We're going to let Eric take the throne.
Awesome, awesome. Again, appreciate you guys for having me on. I can't say enough that, I'm really glad that we're able to really have this conversation. I think it's an important conversation to have amongst liberty-minded people, anarchists, libertarians, and whatnot. But first and foremost, it might not even take me, 5 minutes, but my position has been kind of fairly consistent regarding secession. I find it as a tactic that is more so kind of useful in bringing about like liberty. The actual advocating of secession is by no means the only way to get like a net increase in liberty. But the idea of secession is in itself basically withdrawing. You're withdrawing from something. So in the case of nations and in the case of states or what have you, it's an instance in which territories and or individuals within those, territories withdraw from a rule in which they are currently under. It is a form of decentralization by default. Even if you assume or speculate that the new seceded area will have more intrusion by way of new government, the act of the secession itself was still a form of decentralization. At one point you had this kind of larger entity. And now and that larger entity, it kind of ruled over and it had power over a territory within it. And because they have now seceded, that power has now been dispersed into a smaller, region. You've also took a shot at the tax revenue of the larger territorial monopoly. Now, Vin and myself were both kind of sympathetic to, agorism and participating in black and gray markets lower the tax revenue for the state. It was part of what, Konkin and, the classical kind of agorists made note of. So these tactics aren't necessarily the same by any means, but they're similar in the fact that, again, you're taking a knock at the tax revenue, which is essentially kind of a knock on the power of the larger state in itself. Now, secessions can be done in a million ways by way of a referendum or even in a group of individuals kind of in a given territory, walking to the nearest government and saying, hey, your services will not be needed. Your rule is illegitimate. Whatever it is, I find it as a useful, tool to really bring about liberty. The great Rothbard quote, and I've made note of this, to Vin, and when she talks about, Canada and United States, those are being separate nations, then why not the South? Why can't they secede from the state? The U.S., why can't New York from the Union and New York from the state or Manhattan or each neighborhood, each block, each house and each individual? Even in some of the solutions, for bringing about a free society, I would probably agree with Vin, but I'd also call some of those possibly, depending on where he's at with it, a form of secession. Even if I say I'd support a California secession, I don't want to stop there. I can't stress that enough. That would just serve as more so of a working example in my eyes, and I push for spots and in, territories within California to continue this idea of secession. So if California secedes or Texas secedes, I'm not going and I'm in Texas, which we have a lot of libertarians out here, a lot of people that are maybe definitely in the case compared to California. But I wouldn't stop just because Texas decided to secede. I'd be like, all right, well, we did that. Our work here is not done. Let's start with maybe Denton or Dallas County. Let's go there. And if not Denton and Dallas County, let's talk about those cities, those individual cities and whatnot. So I want to get all the way down to the individual. I want to get all the way down to the individual. That's what Rothbard noted. That's what secession is all about. Secession, at least as far as what I see, it gets closer, to the individual, which is the idea of individual, what liberty is all about, what self-ownership is all about. And that's really essentially what this is and what we advocate as far as utilizing, secession as an effort to bring about a free society. Now, I will say that we need to be consistent if we are to oppose the idea of secession due to what might happen in the new, it's not really a sovereign territory, but the new territory in itself. We could then, at that point, we'd be making the same arguments that statists make when you oppose the government programs or you oppose a particular law. And that is because they fear what may happen without state intervention we can't abolish a law. We can't get rid of state intervention in said market. So all in all, I support the idea of secession, but not only secession as a means for bringing about liberty. I just see it as a tool to kind of, in a vehicle to bring about liberty.
Very interesting, Eric. Thank you so much. For those who are coming on, we're having a debate about succession, and now Vin's going to argue against the case. We pass it back to Vin.
I definitely agree with Eric that the goal is to get us to individual secession. Where I disagree with him is the mechanism seceding from largest, so seceding from federal, then seceding from state, seceding down to county, to city, down to the individual. I view it in the exact opposite way. I view it that it's the individual secession first, that a group of individuals then reaches a point within, say, a municipality, where now they've got a municipality that for all intents and purposes, the power of the state is just, it doesn't work. We have a situation that's very similar to that here outside of Las Vegas, where we have Summerlin, which a lot of people think Summerlin is a suburb. They think it's a city in Las Vegas. It's not. It's all private land. It's privately owned by the Summa Corporation. Those are the types of examples where then cities around decide, okay, this is more profitable. And then you move to a point where eventually the government gets less and less powerful. I've said many times I do not believe that the government is going away. I believe that what's going to happen is that it's going to turn into something like what the Catholic Church is today. It's not going to leave, but it's going to be so insignificant in terms of the power. And that's the real issue here, is that what we're dealing with, the main thing is the hearts and minds of the people. And what's holding us back from a stateless society, what's holding us back from liberty, is not shrinking a government, which I don't believe that this will do, but what is holding us back is that people believe that the state is legitimate. And saying that California has a right to secede from the United States says, or that it's a good idea for California to secede from the United States, says implicitly that, and almost explicitly, that both California and the federal government of the United States are legitimate. How can a non-legitimate entity secede from a non-legitimate entity? So while I do agree with Eric that it would put a dent in the overall U.S. tax base, I don't believe that that would necessarily mean that the U.S. government would have less power. In many ways, I think that it would centralize power with a huge, I mean, right now California represents such a huge chunk of sort of the left in this country that I believe it would centralize a lot of it into the hands of the right. Now, we don't necessarily know if that's going to be a good thing or a bad thing, just as I can't predict that California being completely left-leaning is going to be a good thing or a bad thing. But there is historical precedent that when you have people in charge who lean far to one side of the political spectrum, either left or right, and there's very little opposition to them, that things get totalitarian very quick. So in terms of the centralization issue, I do not believe that it is decentralization. Decentralization would be simply there's more jurisdictions, there's more offices, not a monopoly of power. If you take away the federal government's role in the territory of California, it's not like the new state of California, the new government of California is just going to be like, okay, well, there's no more federal income tax, so we're just going to ignore that revenue. The first thing that they're going to set to do is to hoovering up all of what there used to be, because the public is used to it. The public is used to having that come out of their check. I would wager that there would be more income tax. There would be more regulations. In fact, that's almost guaranteed that there would certainly be more environmental regulations. I mean, that's well known that California would love to do that, and the people of California would love to do that. So I think that for the people there would be higher centralization. For the people outside, there would be higher centralization. And fundamentally, it's about legitimating a government. We start with delegitimizing the government that we have by individuals saying the government is not legitimate, letting the governments as they are fight amongst each other, which helps. Having the multiple jurisdictions where they fight between whose jurisdiction it is helps. We've seen that with, like, for instance, the Bundys. being able to pit a state or a local county like Clark County against the federal government. If we eliminate the federal government out of that, these types of fights are going to be lost more often than they're won. So it's about the hearts, it's about the minds, and I believe that we're actually working at cross ways by supporting secession.
Great, Vin. Thank you very much. So that's round 2 of 3, and now we're going to pass it back to Eric.
Okay. I gotta say right off the bat, like you agreed with me, right at the beginning of what you said when you talked about, individuals. Like, I don't really give a damn, me personally, when it happens, whether it's by way of the individual trying to figure out what it is, that the state is illegitimate and walks to, again, that was the example that I used, and walks to the nearest sheriff's office and tells them, your rule here is illegitimate. We're going to privatize, whatever they do. Like, secession is a secession. I don't really want to focus so much so on, and my position has never been that the only way to succeed is states in itself, California, Texas, New Hampshire, or whatever, Oklahoma, seceding from the federal government is the only form of secession. No, I just support the idea of secession regardless. Yes, California in itself, if they want to secede, I'm all for that. If Texas wants to secede, I'm all for that. And I think it's really contradictory as me personally, as an anarcho-capitalist, but definitely as an Austrian economist or a person that adopts the Austrian way, knowing that I can't predict exactly how this is going to pan out. I'm not going to fear kind of shrinking the state out of fear of what the next government might prop up and form. But I've also said time and time again that, and I agree with you, that we got to change the hearts and minds. We got to change, people need to recognize what the state itself is, because right now within any kind of territorial monopoly, most of the individuals within it, they think that this is a legitimate entity. So it's kind of this perceived legitimacy, not a legit, kind of legitimate entity. They perceive it as such. So yes, the hearts and the minds have got to be changed in order for you to get to a freer society, regardless. So I'm not disputing that. That is not my position. My position, and I agree with that. And I'm actually glad that you mentioned that, because I've said time and time again, with me being involved in music and trying to do the whole cultural infiltration, that's me acknowledging the fact that you have to change the hearts and minds. But the one point that you mentioned with the whole tax revenue, you admitted that, yes, the overall tax revenue of the said entity, that does take a knock on its power. That's not to say that, yes, there won't be aspects in which the government, the current government says, well, we lost all of this revenue. How do we pick it up? They still have to. Who's to say that the individuals that are now within this state say, well, no, we don't want that? Who's to say that they won't adamantly or very aggressively oppose if the state does a kind of a new kind of form of, because I know in Texas, definitely where I'm at, I've walked around with all of my gear, my taxation and stuff gear. I've done a countless amount of interviews and kind of street reporting and activism. A lot of people agree that taxation is stuff. The only people that tax us in terms of income, yes, we have the property taxes and all that. The feds are the only people that taxes Texas in terms of income. If Texas secedes from the feds, and we're not gonna people that are within this aren't just going to sit back and say, well, now I guess Texas needs some revenue, so we're just going to up and want to give them or let them tax our income, which was previously not taxed. You know what I mean? So no, I do not feel as if that is kind of a focal point, or we need to kind of fear a kind of decentralization, or not necessarily decentralization. I don't want to straw man you. Secession by individual states, because we fear that tax revenue is going to need to be collected by the new government. I think that's very dangerous. And again, it goes back to the end of what I said in my last my kind of beginning statement, in which when we start, that's if we want to talk about delegitimizing the state. What exactly are we doing if we are to say that, well, these entities or these governments, they're going to exist, and if we decentralize them or we secede, individuals start in territory start seceding and kind of having their own little rules. We can't have that because, well, the upcoming state might be a little more aggressive or have some more aggression towards the individuals within it. Again, that's the same exact. That argument is no different from these people that we argue, you probably argue with on a daily basis. When I say I will oppose minimum wage or I oppose something that the state does, a particular law, and they say, well, without it, this, and this will happen, so we have to have it. So that in itself, I think that argument is not my necessary argument that's legitimizing the state or secession. I think that in itself, or the fear of what will happen outside of the new state or whatever, is going to kind of result in more aggression. I think that point is dangerous and legitimizes the state.
Thank you very much, Eric. If you guys are watching this live broadcast, comment, like, share, please. Let us know what you think. We're going to pass it back to Vin for the third and final round.
All right, I want to be sure to clarify my argument. My argument here is not, although there is the aspect of, would I like, as a native Californian, and maybe that's where I'm coming from, someplace that's a little bit different. As a native Californian with quite a bit of family and generations of history in California, do I want to see the place that I love and that I still identify with, even though I live in Nevada now? Do I want to see that place go straight up commie? No, I don't. But that's not my basic reasoning. To the point, my argument is that which enemy do we want to fight? Is it better to fight the fight where we know that the government is illegitimate on a federal level, on a state level, as it is, to fight in an arena where we know where the battle lines are? Or do we think that it's a good idea to support a system where, okay, this pops off? And yes, that's California, and people who lean to the left will be like, I'm going to go live in California. And I do agree with you. And Texas doesn't do state income tax. Nevada doesn't do state income tax. If Nevada seceded, it would be a very different place. But that still doesn't make it a good idea when you have people who are still out there saying, if you don't like it, right? That classic, what I call the statist finish line. If you don't like it, move to Somalia, right? Then it'll be, if you don't like it, move to Texas. If you don't like it, move to Nevada. If you don't like it, move to California. But that's what we're trying to fight against. The idea is not that we keep popping up states all over the place for people to leave to so that they can find the state that works best for them. Because states don't stay small. I mean, as Stefan Molyneux said before he turned into a statist himself, which is kind of ironic, that he said, the government that starts out the smallest will end up the largest. That a Texas or a Nevada, while as states, as individual states in the Union, they are operating in a certain way because they're trying to attract business, they're trying to attract people. That's a huge carrot, no income tax. But do you think that seceded, that those places would completely eschew the whole idea of gaining more income tax? Do you think that if Texas or Nevada seceded right now, and they could, they now had the power of the IRS, they now had the power of the federal government, they now needed to have a military, they needed to have international relations, you don't think that they would start in with income tax slowly over time? And so the question is, do we want to fight this battle now with the way that things stand? Or do we support an idea of, okay, let's secede over here, over here, over here, and hope that the state doesn't grow into a monster? But history has said that that just doesn't happen. The more established a state becomes, the more oppressive a state becomes. Secession legitimizes the idea of the state. Texas seceding, whether it charges income tax now or not, Nevada seceding, whether it charges income tax now or not, legitimizes the idea that Texas or Nevada is a government, has a right to that territory, which as anarchists, as anarcho-capitalists, as agorists, that's exactly what it is that we're trying to fight. So in the same way, I view it much in the same way that I have talked about marijuana and the legalization of marijuana. I'm not for the legalization of marijuana because that legitimizes the idea that the state has a right to regulate and tax a plant. I'd be for decriminalization, getting it completely off the books, because I don't believe that the state has a right to these things. And that's the place that we have to be at. That's like legalizing a federal Californian government, as opposed to saying the government of California is illegitimate, the government of the county is illegitimate, the government of the city is illegitimate, and the federal government is illegitimate as well because we're free individuals. So that's my argument. My argument is not that we should be afraid of what happens when California secedes or when another state secedes. My argument is that here is the battleground. We know where it's at right now, that we fight the state as illegitimate from the beginning. And we don't wait for a good idea to become a really bad idea, which is, history has shown us that's the nature of a state.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Vin. And we're going to pass it to Eric for the third and final round. Eric?
Well, my question, what's the meme with the chicken? She's like, why not both? That's where I'm at right now. Like, why not both? Like, I can, by no means am I limited to saying that, well, let's secede. And also saying, well, the state is an illegitimate monopoly on use of force and violence within a given territory. Use of force and also ultimate decision making within a given territory. So we can do. I don't want to act like one can't do both. I actually think, and that's the goal that I would hope to kind of accomplish with secession, is that once these definitely when we talk about working examples, we can talk about human action. I would hope you're versed in the Austrian economics and as well, but we talk about kind of human action, and people will see this as a working example. If Texas secedes, California, Oklahoma, yada yada, and all these individual spots start seceding again, like I said right from the get-go, who is to say that areas within them won't want to secede? Definitely once they saw that it worked, you know what I mean? So I understand where you're coming from when you're saying, well, the idea isn't to have a bunch of all of these little states pop up, you know what I mean? But in the same respects, the goal is to get towards the individual and towards liberty. There's not going to be some universal where we're going to pretend it out of existence, universal. And I don't want to wait to move towards the individual simply because we have to wait for everybody, the millions of people that are within this given territory, to say, all right, the state is illegitimate. Now, we done pretended the government out of existence. I just don't really think that's an effective way to get towards liberty, which is, again, what we both, you and I, agree. That's the ultimate goal. Now, I agree with you that moving, the whole move to Somalia, that's not an argument. It is a silly cop-out way to kind of deflect really from having a legitimate conversation as far as what the government is and whatnot. However, we can't deny that individuals compete. We can't deny that the states even compete. And I believe, honestly, that is a really, really serious thing and a really an effective thing. If people see all of these entities and all of these different little territories start seceding, and then you have maybe this territory that's a little more oppressive than the other, you're going to have people flocking to other territories. And it's a lot easier to even do that when you do have some type of secession. Because what we have right now is that the federal government has all of this territory, and it's very, very difficult to even move out or get out or move to another entity another place, another territory that's more along the lines of what you hope to have in a freer, definitely society, at least in our case. It's a lot more difficult to do that when you have this big, massive 50 state kind of entity in the federal government, as opposed to 50 of individual ones that are essentially the individuals within them are competing with each other. And again, the secessions, who's to stop that 50 from becoming 100, or that 100 to becoming 200, that 200 to becoming 400, until we get all the power goes all the way to the individual. And I can't stress that enough. That is the ultimate goal. So by default, there's going to have to be some type of secession when that actually happens. But again, we can start with the federal government. You can go down to Texas. You can go down to Denton. You can go down to Arbery area, which is where I'm at. And all the way till we get to my neighborhood and we say, you know what, this is going to be a voluntary society, all the way to my individual house. Like, why can't we keep it going? And that's the ultimate idea of secession, and why I would think that it was a tool that can be utilized. That's not to say that I can't equally go out there and say, well, the state is still illegitimate, don't you know? Hell, that's the reason why I would keep pushing for secession. More people realize that, you know, these states are illegitimate. The rule is illegitimate, that it's not necessary, that it's not needed. Again, when you get a group like a territory full of people that do that, what happens next? It would essentially be a secession. When let's say this whole neighborhood that I'm in right now, we all said, look, we want a voluntary society, and let's say Denton County was the ultimate government that ruled over where I'm at. We go to the office and we say, the sheriff's office or wherever in the fucking county or whatever, and we say, look, your rule is illegitimate. We got it. And we have more of a voluntary society. People are going to see this as a working example, but I don't want to act like we have to kind of make this uniform effort to bring about the state, and that's the only way that we can work towards liberty. I just think that's very, very ineffective. But thanks for having me, fellas, big time.
Absolutely, man. Thank you for coming.
Awesome.
I think it was
awesome.
good. I think
Yeah.
it was
This was awesome. This was awesome, and I can't say enough. And I didn't want to cut you off. I can't say enough that these types of discussions are very, very important to our community, because what we're talking about is really, we all agree. You and I probably 99%.
Absolutely.
We would agree on that. We want a freer society. We're brothers and trying to work towards that, right?
No doubt.
You know what I mean? With these conversations, we're talking about, all right, how do we get there? And I think it's good because we want to find the more effective routes, and we don't want to be one-trick ponies as well. You know, so these conversations, I'm actually glad that you wanted to, kind of have this kind of discussion and debate take place. And I think it's very, very important, and it's admirable that you wanted to have it, because I think it's very important for our community. It doesn't mean that we're infighting or anything like that. Again, like you said, this is 99% of the time you and I probably agree. This is more about talking about kind of what the vehicle and what's the most effective way of getting to a free society. And I think this is important discussions to have.
Well, I mean, look, if we're going to be free marketeers, right, we've got to embody it. And part of the free market, as I always say, is it's got to be the free market of ideas has to be there as well, right? So it's like, I don't believe that there is one way. I certainly don't believe that I have the right way. I have an opinion on the way that this thing goes. But I think it's very important that we work at this from all sides, and that people are able to hear. And I think that that's the whole thing. I mean, you and I would sit down and we're, like you say, 99% we're in agreement. But I think for people who are actually making moves and trying to decide on sort of which way they're going to approach it, if anybody's intent is to get to a stateless society, is to get to more liberty, I may disagree with the path that they're taking, but hell, the market is going to say whether or not which one is going to work. You know what I'm saying? So I'm very, very glad that you decided to come on and do this. And
absolutely,
look, for the people who are watching, I was looking at some of the comments when you were talking, and I know that some of the people who are watching have some debates with other people online. So you know what? There's an open invitation. Anybody reach out to me, and we would be more than happy to set this up. And Activist Post is more than happy to host it as well. And I hope that other people do it. I know that you guys do it on your own. So you know what I'm saying? I hope that it keeps going, man. Thank you very, very much for coming on.
That's it, guys.
Absolutely, man. Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much. That's it for the debate. We hope you guys enjoyed watching. Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Vin.
Thank you.
And please like, comment, and share below. Let us know how you feel about secession, and we'll talk to you guys soon.
Oh, hey, can you hear us?
Yeah.
Mute.
Mute him.
Ready, sit, ready,
Hey, can you hear us?
Oh yeah.
Yo. Hey.
Shit.
This don't make any sense when you realize the lies. I hate to say it, but your protesting is ill-advised. You put your life into the hands of a bunch of silly guys. It's a contradiction and freedom has to be legalized. For example, when a cop shooting a black man, you focus on the racism, ignoring all the statism. Homicides rioted, it's not about to save him, cause you must have forgot that that's the power that you gave him. Criminal justice reform is a euphemism for a bunch of dumb foolish slaves of Stockholm Central, thinking that we held to the same standard. Don't do it, boy, so they can investigate themselves and find no wrongdoing. Bro, sit and think about this foolishness. You hit the ballot box supporting fools that don't know you exist. Warfare, healthcare, and your minimum wage. Call it progressive, man, but you ain't obedient slave.
But unfortunately, it's more starting on the East Coast. I don't know whose idea again.